Hello, animation fans, and welcome to another iAnimate podcast. You're listening to episode 28, and I am your host, Larry Vasquez. I'm flying solo on this one here, but we've got another great interviewee, one of our very own, Ken Fountain. He's been with us as an instructor since we basically opened up the doors for iAnimate, and I've actually had the opportunity to have him as an instructor, and so I'm really looking forward to spending a little time with him and having him actually share some of his knowledge in this podcast. He's just an amazing animator, great guy, and he's got some really, really good insight to acting, and so I think it's going to make for another really cool podcast. So without further ado, let's pull on Ken Fountain. Hey, how you doing?
What's up, man?
Long time no see.
Yeah, great to see you.
You too. How you been?
Oh, good.
Jordan, you taking some time out with us. It's always a great pleasure, and we get a lot of good feedback from people listening to the podcast and appreciate your guys' time, so thank you.
Great. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And also having you as an instructor previously, it's always a nice extra bonus for me to get in here. Recap a little bit. I had Ted T a couple weeks back, and I've had Mike Walling on before, and then so I think the only other instructor I'm missing here is Jamal Bradley, so I got to get him on. So, so the instructors that I've had, so.
He even has some cool stuff to talk about. I'd like to just sit and talk to Jamal for a little bit.
All right. Well, first things first, I always like diving into somebody's kind of background. It's always interesting for me to kind of see how someone kind of came into animation. Each person's very unique and different. And so I just kind of want to hear how maybe you got into animation and maybe what you were doing beforehand, what kind of prompted you to get into animation, and how you got to where you're at now.
Yeah. Well, I kind of took a non-direct path. In fact, I mean, I clearly remember a time when I wasn't even considering being an animator. You know, I mean, I was a kid who drew a lot when I was younger, and and sat around drawing superheroes at the kitchen table kind of stuff. But I became a Dungeons and Dragons kid. I'm of that era, so I was the D&D dork when I was growing up. But I mean, that's so artistic. They had all the manuals and stuff, and my friends and I would sit around and draw the monsters and. And I watched cartoons, but I never really kind of put it together like that's what I want to do. I was just having fun playing this game. And what I really wanted to be was, I wanted to be an actor when I was young and as I was coming up through school. So I was always on stage and I was always in plays and I sang. And when I got into high school, our drama department for this really tiny little school was amazing. Like we had a great drama instructor who really challenged us to do like really heavy plays, as dramatic plays, as well as we would explore Shakespeare. We would even at one point we would do children's theater, which was really fun. We'd go around to the different schools, and there was always a point in the year where we'd have to write our own play. The group would write like a comedy review, and it was such a challenge. So I learned so much. So that's what I was leaving school wanting to do. And somewhere in high school there, hooked up with a bunch of guys that asked me to join their band. And that was it. I was like, okay, now I know what I want to do. And so
I'm up on stage singing too.
Oh yeah, come on. So, and we were writing our own songs too. We did other people's songs as well, but from the start we were like, we want to be our own band. So we wrote. And so I left high school and was like, I don't really want to go to college. Like, there's nothing that I could go to art school and spend and have a huge debt. And even then, I was like, I don't want that. I want to just get out there. And I was doing like things from the local Renaissance Fair, which was a blast. I did 5 seasons of that and learned how to sword fight and improv and dialects and juggling and all these things that just I picked up from the other actors and took classes on. But the band was still going on, and the band, soon after I left high school, really started to do well. We were playing really large clubs in the city and opening up for, at the time, really big acts like 10,000 Maniacs and Naked Raygun. And I mean, like weird, they put us on these really bizarre shows because we didn't really fit anything. And so I put my whole focus into that and literally had almost my whole focus into that for 20 years. I mean, like that was what I was doing, and everything fed into that. And I learned how to do our own graphics promotion. So that's how I picked up digital design, because I was an art student in school. So I figured, well, this is a good tangent, and got a little studio going. And through working for the music scene in graphic design and playing, I don't know. Well, really what ended up happening is that my band at the time wanted to create a new website. It was a new band creating a new website. Flash was coming into play. And my saxophone player was like, hey, we should do a little animation at the beginning of the thing. And I was like, oh yeah, let me try it. And, did this little animation of our logo. And then he had a short film idea because that went so well. He's like, let's do this animated short film. And I was like, okay. And we started working on it. And within months, I was ready to drop everything. I was like, I am done music. And literally, when I was about 35, I had like a final retiring show. I was done. I'm animating. This is it. And changed my graphic design business to an animation business. Was doing tons of free work for bands, like doing for labels, bands on labels that want a promotion. Started working for advertising. Finally got into Calabash Animation, which was like my dream when I started. They're a really good animation studio in Chicago. And that I thought, okay, well, now I'm doing what I wanted to do. And was taking the animation mentor course at the time, and kind of halfway through it, got a tap to come work at DreamWorks. I didn't expect it at all. And it was like, wow, okay, everything has changed. And that's kind of the story of that. So I've got to, and I think that I've always said all the tangents of all the performance-based and visual-based things that I did up to that time, I think that's what fed into it, and that's what made me click with it so easily. And I don't know. So since that moment when Dave Burgess said, "Hey, come on over," I was like, the life has been vastly different and awesome.
See, that's why I ask these questions, because that's what I'm saying. It's interesting to me on how, I mean, like you said, just okay, hey, we're going to do a website, and then we're going to do a promotion, and then animation, and that's where it just kind of runs from. And so I love hearing those streams on how things kind of flow from there. So
yeah, and I made it sound really fast. I mean, this was the course of
right
over like 5-6 years of it, just kind of slowly evolved into that. So it still took a lot of practice. It still took me, it didn't come that easy.
It's just those steps that you kind of look and go, well, I don't know, how did I get in this? And you kind of look back and you go, oh, this is how it kind of came about. So
never would have imagined.
Yeah.
Really happy about it.
So now, what was your first film over at DreamWorks?
I started on Monsters vs. Aliens, which was a film that Dave was the supervising animator on. So he brought me and my friend Aris DeVoe onto the crew. And man, we just dove right in. I mean, we started at the beginning of production, but there was like a Show West was going on that winter. And they were really itching to show off the stereoscopic. This was going to be the first major studio stereoscopic, animated film, feature film. So they totally wanted to show this off. So we had to crunch all the way through Christmas getting tons of footage to be able to show. And so there wasn't time to be a junior animator. It was kind of one of those, I had to jump in. Yeah.
Now, you got a real killer shot in that film when I think once the president's kind of doing his music thing right before the alien.
Yeah. That was freaky. Like I'd seen the storyboards. I saw that we saw the story reel. That was a really funny part, obviously. And I'm like, man, whoever gets to animate that's going to be funny. They're going to kill it. And I forget who actually had the shot. I just had a few shots led up to it. And the production manager came into my office. He's like, "How you doing?" I'm like, "I'm doing okay." And he says, "So do you think if I asked you to pick up a few more shots, you'd be able to do them?" I was like, and I'm new. I'm not going to say no.
Yeah.
So, I was like, yeah. He's like, because you play music, right? You like play instruments? I said, yeah, I do. He said, perfect. How about if and he showed me the shots, and I was like, seriously? I mean, this is like this is the climax punchline of the scene. You trust me for that? He's like, you can do it. Go for it. It's like, okay. So, I learned Axel F I just kind of figured out where it was on the piano, and animated it. And also I had played keyboards in a band, in one of my bands, and had videotape of myself looking completely ridiculous, swinging my shoulder length hair around, looking stupid. So I grabbed that and I did some reference on my own, and was able to get a laugh in dailies, and knew I was like, okay, this is going to be cool. Like, and when you go into a theater, like I went by myself to an opening week of the show, and when you sit there and watch like an entire theater erupt in laughter over some silly stuff you did, that's pretty cool.
You want to stand up and be like, that was me.
That was me. Yeah, that was pretty. It was a pretty big responsibility to have gotten it was literally my first production shots.
Yeah, that's a big shot in your first film. So yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Now, because now you mentioned he knew that you're a musician.
Yeah.
How much of your backgrounds do some of these studios know about? Is that something that they kind of in a bio, or is it just kind of word of mouth? Because I can see where, Michael Kiley, he's worked on Kung Fu Panda. He's got a martial arts background.
Oh yeah,
So
Ted too.
yeah, Ted T as well. So how much of that is known, or how does it get around, or what?
I mean, I think it came out in just meeting people. I don't know how much they knew about it when they hired me. And, your real is your real, so, but after getting to know people, because like Dave, for example, like when I first got there, of course, we connected right away, and we're both big music fans, and he plays, and we started jamming together, and Chris Kirschbaum and all these guys, you just kind of get to know people, and they start to learn who you are. So it was it was just something that they had in the back of their mind, like, oh, okay, well, this might be good. And that's the same thing when somebody would think of a shot that they would give to Mike or to give to Ted, or, you consider who the person is and how much they're going to know about this, what they're animating. So, but I don't think it had tons to do with them bringing me on. But I'll say in subsequent interviews that I've done with other studios, it is something that comes up in conversation, and I think supervisors dig it.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay,
yeah.
So just kind of get that interaction then.
Yeah, especially the performance part of it too, that you've been on stage and you've studied performance in some way. Like, that's a big asset, I think.
One of the things that you mentioned here kind of intrigued me here is you said you had to write your own plays.
Yeah.
One of the workshops that you've kind of been more kind of set at now is the workshop 6, which is dealing with sequence work.
Yeah.
How much of the writing your own plays deals with this workshop here that you primarily have taken under?
I think tons of the stage experience in general, excuse me, has contributes to this whole class, because what we study, I think, is something that maybe animators don't think about a lot, which is what would actors do if they were on stage together? Because it's not only multi-shots, it's multi-characters that we work with. So it's the fundamentals of ensemble performance that you have to think about. You have to think about graphically what these characters look like together. Does their graphic shape communicate their relationships? Does their body language also communicate their relationships? Are they adequately giving focus to the character who needs focus at that time? And then there's the cinematic stuff, like the timing of your cuts, like the action and flow through cuts, like screen space, which aren't necessarily stage acting things. Those are more film things, but it's all things that you have to think about when you are a person actually on stage that's being looked at. You have to and the director helps you do this too, obviously, but you have to be thinking about, am I contributing to this ensemble that's all on here to tell the story every single moment? You're not upstaging your fellow actors. Your audience is believing you, and they're believing the situation. So yeah, we get really, really deep into a lot of that.
That's great. That's great. Now, you mentioned you had how many years in kind of the background for acting?
Oh gosh, I've been on stage since I was like in 3rd grade. I always was that kid that just got asked to be the lead in something, and so I felt really lucky and got a lot of experience. And then as I was through high school and after high school, being lucky enough to get training from people, in improv and stuff like that was valuable.
Now, what part of the stage do you like the most that kind of transitions into animation? Is it just the pure acting portion of it, or is there a particular aspect of it?
I think there's two things. The simplicity element is the one thing. I think you really get to know how to keep what you're doing simple and readable, because an actor has to do that, especially on stage when you're really far away from your audience on under a big proscenium on a big set. You got to make sure that what you're doing is readable. In fact, when I was doing outdoor theater, that's even more like you got people that are hundreds of feet back, that have to not only hear what you're saying, but they have to look at you and decide and maybe even decide if they're interested in looking and watching what you're doing. But that kind of dovetails into the idea of getting response. And I talk about this a lot when I'll speak or a class or whatever, that the joy of trying something out in front of tons of people and maybe even having it fail and is really great, because you start to learn what reads. And that's an advantage that you don't really have as an animator, because obviously what you're doing has like piecemeal response that you get from your supervisors and you get response in dailies, but you really have to think beyond it and be able to see what the finished product's going to look like and be confident that it's going to get the laugh or the breathlessness or the gasp or whatever instantly.
Huh. That's great. Yeah, I'd watched a recent interview with Conan O'Brien and Martin Short, and it was very funny actually. But one of the things they were talking about was kind of as comedians honing their skills, and it was primarily around the dinner tables as kids. But it was that same kind of concept, though, that you had a crowd and you just threw it out there. You found out what stuck and what didn't.
Yeah. 90% of the time, it doesn't stick. I just watched a cool one like that. There's that, I think Showtime or somebody has one with Louis C.K., Chris Rock, Jerry Seinfeld, and Ricky Gervais. I mean, like, theirs are four people that you could learn a lot from. And they just sat around talking about this exact same thing too, how they hone the rhythm of their language. And I wanted to show this to my class. I'm like, see, there's so much in the rhythm of how you deliver something, even in your body movements, like that make what you're doing impactful. And comedians aren't just natural talents. They're also people who study the hell out of it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, the opportunity to actually get an audience to do that, I can imagine. So you mentioned that kind of helped simplify things. You're wanting things to be very clear to your audience as on the stage, and that's helped transition now as well when you kind of start approaching a shot, right?
Yeah, stage acting is not natural movement. Stage acting is also caricature movement. So you're wanting to get story points across just like you do in animation. So you weed out all the stuff that is going to confuse your audience, and you make sure that they see the stuff that tells the story. And that's all we're doing.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so from Monsters vs. Aliens, you moved to Shrek 4, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That was a great movie. I really liked it.
That was a blast.
Now, that's where Jason kind of got a lot of you guys, because that's when we first really started iAnimate, right around that time. And that's where he kind of pulled a lot of you guys from that here. Yeah. What was so much fun about that show?
Oh, man. The whole production was so well run, for one, which is, that's often the complaint, is that it's just maybe disorganized or the schedules are too tight, or the director doesn't get it, or your supervisors don't get it, whatever it is. None of these complaints were on this show. Our production was so well run. The director made us pee our pants every time we sat in dailies. I mean, he was so funny and such a nice guy and so smart and totally understanding, and really, like, we sat in the first day of dailies, and you don't get this often, but the director, Mike Mitchell, took the time to say, okay, you guys are all filmmakers. I know this, and I'm not going to ever treat you any differently. So we are collaborating on everything you do. This is not my way or the highway. So I want you to feel comfortable bringing me your idea and pitching it and arguing it, whatever you want, because we want to make the best movie we can. And you can imagine starting a movie like that, you're like, this is going to be good. It starts on a great footing. And then all this, I had Jason as my supervisor, which was really fortunate. And, he's the same way. he is one of, I mean, the guy is all collaboration. I mean, I haven't worked with anybody that has the least amount of ego in what he does. It's just like, great, let's do it. Let's go. Come on, let's go. Yes, that's awesome. Let's go. I mean, and so we had a great sequence team relationship. We had a great production schedule and a great director. And I wasn't even that excited to work on Shrek. I'm not a Shrek fan. The movie was just a blast.
That's great.
So I have such great memories of it.
But you did get to work on a very, to me at least, what it seemed like a very, very fun character, Rumpelstiltskin.
Yeah.
He was awesome.
Yeah.
He was awesome. Now, one of the things you talk about in your class is a lot of subtext. What were some of the things that you looked for as far as getting into the character with him?
Well, we had to invent him from scratch, obviously. He didn't exist in any of the, well, at least in this form, he didn't exist in the Shrek world. So one of the great, and again, to Mike Mitchell's credit, he did his homework on it and put together film character examples of people that he thought that this character should kind of be like. He brought in Strangers on a Train. He brought, what is that? Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, that movie. And a couple of other ones, and really picked out the qualities that he thought fit to get Rumple started. Then what was really kind of fun for us is that Jason's team was the first team. We got the first sequence with him when the rig came out of pre-production, and we got to spend a lot of time. Jason actually sat us down at a table. We just went and got coffee and was like, okay, let's chat about what you guys are thinking about doing for your shots, and let's see if it matches what everybody else is thinking. Let's try to find him. And that was a huge bonus because it took us into the scene with an even more consistent character. And then like the third layer of that is that as we started bringing in our ideas, the director would pick things out and be like, I love that. That's how I want him to do this the whole time. And this wasn't just like off the cuff. He really meant it, and he would stick to it the rest of the film. And, I had a couple of those moments, and everybody had a couple of those moments. And then, of course, John Hill starts doing shots with him and pretty much, defines 2/3 of the character, does amazing stuff. But it's great because that's what you do. You watch what everybody else is doing, and if the director's responding, and then you go, okay, well, that's my goalpost. That was really that was fun, getting to invent a whole character like that, being part of inventing a whole character.
Okay. Yeah. One of my favorite shots, I think, and I think you did it, though, is when he walks in there and he's like, so if you think you're going to walk in here and be all with his with his fingers.
Hey, that's fun. I don't know if the reference came through, because what the director was trying to, when he had Walt in the studio recording the bit, they did it to make fun of what was that YouTube clip of Batman? What's that guy's name? What's the actor's name?
Christian Bale.
Oh my gosh, yeah, Christian Bale.
Yeah.
Remember that YouTube clip that was going around where he was yelling at the stagehand guy? And that was what he said. He's like, if you think you're gonna walk in here and just they made a bit out of it, and I don't know if that ever ended up reading to the audience, but it was. I was pretty happy to get to do that shot.
What's kind of funny is I didn't take it that way, so I'm not sure if it read that way, but I think what it did is, though, it really solidified Rumpelstiltskin's attitude. That just so it really helped sell him, I think, at least.
It made him like an impetuous little, teen,
All right, and then you jump to Megamind, which is actually one of my all-time favorite movies. I just really love that movie. I thought, there's certain times I think studios get actors just because of the name.
Right.
But I thought Will Ferrell he was Megamind, just like Jack Black was as Poe. It just fits. And so a lot of the humor and I think sincerity came across with Megamind. What were some of the things that you learned from that show?
Tons. I love that movie too. And the styles that we got, that movie spanned like Warner Brothers slapstick cartoon to like the most dramatic, like Cameron Fielding had like that, the just that single face shot where he swallows, I mean, there's like that super subtle to the super cartoony. And that was a pleasure because there were people, I came in kind of a third of the way into the production, maybe even halfway in. And so there have been tons of those really broad shots, and I got to, again, another example of amazing leadership. Jason Schleifer, who was the supervising, the Hoka, the head of character animation on that show, sat every single animator down and was like, "What do you want to do? What is it what if you come to the end of this production? What do you want to have gained?" And do you? He said, it could be you want to head DreamWorks by the end of it, or you could just want to, get a raise, whatever. It's like, I don't care what it is. And I was like, I want to be able to animate like this sequence. I pulled up the Spider sequence. Like, if I can get better at that, then I'm fine with what, that I will be happy for the rest of my life. And he helped. I mean, he was like, okay, I got that. It's in the back of my mind. So he did his best to kind of help me get some stuff that would push that in mind. So that being able to not only to have somebody helping you grow as an animator, and still get to work on a movie that was hysterically funny, and lots of physical challenges, like flight and, like big action punching scenes and all that, was just a blast. And then the cherry on top was that Tom McGrath, the director, is awesome. Just bar none. Mike Mitchell was hysterical. He was fun in his own way, and Tom was fun in his own way. Just the man's brain is huge inside of there. And you'd sit, just as a quick story, like we would sit at dailies, and this was like, people warned me of this before I started on the thing. They're like, be careful, because dailies are tough, because Tom doesn't talk. And I'm like, he doesn't talk. And he does. You'd play your shot, and he'd loop it like 10, 12, 15, and wouldn't say a word. And you'd just be sitting there, peeing yourself. Oh my God. And everybody's waiting for him to say something. So they wouldn't come out and laugh, because what if he hates it? So, yeah. And then he'd turn to you and he would look you right in the eye and all of a sudden turn on and just start collaborating with you about it, or laughing, or whatever he's going to do. And really had amazing insight into the character and an ability to explain to you what he wanted and get up and act it and crack you up. And, and we would record all these dailies. So, you get to watch him acting like a fool in daily. It was awesome. And I don't know, I liked him so much by the end of the show and had such respect for him that it made it that much better. And maybe this is like a key that's what helps, is that when your director is really good, that makes all the difference.
That's what it sounds like. We had Jason and Mike Walling on a podcast, and they worked on Cruise together, and they mentioned that it was such a great experience, but I think a large part had to do with the director as well.
Yeah, Chris Sanders.
Chris Sanders, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that just seems to be kind of a theme that I'm hearing from you guys there. The other thing, though, that you mentioned in this one as well as in Shrek 4 was it seemed like you had some ownership, so to speak. You mentioned with Shrek 4, he was, hey, this is not my way or the highway. I want to hear you guys' feedback. And it seemed like you kind of had some ownership kind of moving into it. And it seems the same thing with Megamind in regards to Jason. How do you pronounce his last name? Schleifer. Yeah. And it seemed like it was the same kind of thing. Okay, what can I help you own in this, whether it be, like you said. So that seems to be kind of a nice theme as well in regards to making a production that you look back and you go, I had a blast on that one.
Right, it is, because that's when you bring out the best in the people that are anything, animating for you, lighting for you, character design, whatever. Obviously, you get the best results. So it wasn't like they were pigeonholing anybody. I felt for a while that I was the dance guy. After the president, it was like, oh, well, there's a dance scene in Shrek. We'll do that. Oh, there's a Dr. Cockroach dance scene at the end. We'll do that. So getting all the dance sequences, and then I got the Rumple dance in the credits. So that was kind of funny. But at the same time, I think my comedy chops were coming through. Character understanding, stuff like that I think, I felt like I was getting some ownership of what I was working on, sure.
Were there, what were some favorite shots that you'd worked on for Shrek and Megamind?
Oh. I don't know. I mean, there was two different angles to Shrek stuff. Like I really love doing the weird comedy. I would actually say this about everything that I worked on. I felt like I got depended on if there was a joke that was odd and the director really loved it and it was like he didn't want to cut it because he loved it and nobody was making it. I got to do it. Like for instance, the do do shot, like the cat's meow joke in Monsters vs. Aliens. You know, like there was another shot of Monsters vs. Aliens that Conrad, the director, loved, and he didn't want to cut it when Derek is going. I never, ever, 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 ever thought about that. The producers didn't like it, you know, and he was like, just let's try it. Here, do you want to try it? I said, I'll try it. Let's try it. We can do it. And we got it sold, you know, so it stayed. And the Puss in Boots trying to lick himself. You know, he was fat and he's trying to clean himself and he couldn't. Like, that's just weird. I mean, and in boards, when we watched that in the storyboards, everybody was like, oh, blah! So just groaning. And it was destined for the cutting room floor, you know? And Mike was like, nah, come on, let's try it. We can do it. So, and I kind of kept getting all those like Hail Mary pass jokes, you know?
Give it to Ken, he'll save it.
Yeah, so I think those are always my favorite because they were the risky ones. And it was and it was, I was kind of the make or break on them. If they didn't work, they probably would have been cut, you know? So.
Did you feel any pressure with that? Or was it like, hey, this is going to get cut if I don't? What's the harm?
I didn't want him to get cut. It was pressure, but I would always see them in boards and be like, I want that. I want that shot. I can do that one. And if I ended up getting it, I'd be like, yes. So it was more like I don't know. I always kind of figured I could do the oddball ones.
There you go. And that's kind of funny because certain people are drawn to, you know, certain types. But yeah, I think probably with your background in theater and knowing how to really push that timing, I'm sure that's where that came out for those.
I may have actually like really petitioned Jason to give me that entire Puss in Boots licking himself sequence. Like I was like, come on, I can do that. I don't know, it's a lot of shots. I'm like, oh, come on.
All right. Now that was Monster vs. Aliens, Shrek 4, and Megamind. Those are three movies that you worked on with Jason Ryan, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, same team or just same films?
Same team.
Okay.
I mean, he was my supervisor on all. Although, I mean, on Monsters, it was such an erratic schedule. We bounced between supervisors, whatever sequence we were on. But in Shrek and Megamind, I was on his sequence team solidly. He did this. Just a quick story. He did this great thing, and he may have told you about this in Megamind, where he got us all together. Tom was really responding to video reference. It was a kind of an odd dynamic. This is the first time I'd ever seen animators actually bring their video reference into dailies. And because Tom was responding to him, he'd really be able to read it and pick out things and say, I want that, 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 and that. So Jason had this idea. He's like, let's record. We had this sequence in Titan's apartment, you know, between where they were arguing. And he's like, I want to shoot this whole thing live action and edit it and show Tom the edited live action version and get our notes from that. And there, you know, half of us were like, all right. And the other half were like, oh, you know, I don't like doing video reference. And Jason rallied the troops and got everybody in there. And everybody was in the room at the same time, mostly, so we could give each other notes and laugh and respond, you know, like getting the response. And Jason would, you know, give directorial notes kind of. And then Ben Rush and I sat down and edited the whole thing in an afternoon. And we showed it and it paid off. And and we got a really good sequence out of it. So, and I think you can only get that from having a really good relationship with your supervisor after a long time. You know, I think that helped.
That's great. Now, do you have any notes for shooting reference? I know, like you mentioned, that was a great point there where you have some people going, oh, I don't know, you know, I'm not real comfortable here. You have in your background in acting, I'm sure that's a little bit easier for you kind of jumping up in front of the camera or something. But do you have any notes or tips or tricks that you would say, hey, when you go in the reference room, this is what I think you should be doing, you know?
Yeah. There's in regards to like the people, like I know lots of people that don't shoot video reference.
Mm-hmm.
They're awesome. I mean, it doesn't make or break your animation by any means. It's all up to your own brain. But the key is that it is just reference. I think sometimes there's too much focus on getting the right shot on camera in your video reference so that you can animate it. And if you don't get it, then somebody else will do it for you, or your supervisor will do it, and it's all about getting the right reference first. And I don't personally believe in that, because I know a lot of people that don't like getting in front of the camera and they don't feel comfortable with it. But what I do think getting in front of the camera helps is, one, you get to feel it in your own body, and you can often put on like clothing or put weights on your body, or props that give you the feel of what that feels like. So that helps. And then the other side of it, if you think your video reference sucks, you might still know what you intended to do. So at least you can record something and look at it and go, yeah, that's awful, but I know what I wanted to do. So at least it gives you notes. It's like taking notes. And I always thumbnail before I go in, so at least I have an idea of what I want to shoot for. And I still improv, but to me, it's just note taking. It's not literally the skeleton of your animation.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the reference when you need to go back to your ideas. You start forgetting your ideas and getting lost. You can go back to that and go, oh, right. That's what I wanted to do. Or yeah, that's what that mechanics looks like. Got it. This is why it doesn't work. So that's what I tell my students, and that's how I work. Is like, don't pound your brain trying to, saying I'm a terrible actor. I shot like 50,000 takes and here's 70 of them for you to watch. No,
it's a full length movie.
Just don't sweat it that hard.
Okay, so let's transition a little bit then to your process. When you get a shot, what do you mentioned a little bit of thumbnailing.
Yeah.
Give us kind of a broad picture if you don't mind. You get a shot, how do you approach it?
I still thumbnail. I do, and I work in Toon Boom a lot because of Crackerbox and stuff. So I'll actually kind of semi-animate it like Jason does a little bit now, just to get the idea. But even if I just do thumbnails, I'll even draw over my own drawings, just messy layered drawings, just so I can get an idea of graphically how I want a shot to look and how much power and cartooniness or focus in the eyes or whatever. But at least I have an idea so that I can go in and then get in front of the camera and act it out. So those two steps to me are still key. And like I said, I think I overact in front of the camera. And that's so I don't do what I do in front of the camera because I watch it and I go, you look like an idiot. But I know what I wanted to do. So I'll tone it down or, streamline it or simplify it and pick out literally whatever I think the story is supposed to be. I pick out those freeze frame moments that I think tell it. And I remember my friend Steve Cunningham used to do this. He used to pull out still frames from his video and then paste them all over his computer screen, desktop, and just leave them there and not really go back to his reference. That was his starting point. And I learned a lot from that. I was like, that's a really good idea. So I kind of do that for myself now too, where I just take the key kind of tentpole moments in the video and then I use those to begin posing out story poses in Maya or wherever, and start from there. Then I have this weird jump off point because I still don't go back to reference. I like to figure out my breakdowns in my brain, because with the story poses you get your timing. That's where you go, okay, I want to get to this moment faster and I want to wait for a while and then get to these 3 moments really quickly and then a pause and then maybe the climax. So I figure out my timing and I figure out what kind of force is supposed to happen between those. If it's 2 poses that are drastically different that change in a short amount of time, my breakdowns have to describe that force, So I kind of, I I improvise those breakdowns a lot more than I used to. If I keep watching it and I go, it's missing something, I'll go back to my reference and go, what's the real mechanics on that? Oh yeah. And then go back to the breakdown poses and start, adjusting it to match that. But I keep trying to stay interpretive, and I think I get more and more like that as I keep working, because now I'm doing even more cartoony stuff these days too. So I like to stay as interpretive as possible. And you still have to worry about things like overlapping action and stuff to make sure you're not pose to posy, and really worry about kind of the micro beats in there as well too, the little thought beats that go on in the eyes and the micro expressions and stuff. But I just start to layer that on as I'm building breakdown poses, and that gets me to my final product a lot more efficiently than I used to. I used to kind of stick more to reference and kind of work on threes, and that just, I kind of get lost in the spaghetti of the curves.
This kind of sounds like it gives you your pose to pose benefits of knowing where you're going, but also that straight ahead of giving you that freedom to kind of just animate and I don't want to say explore, because you already have your goalpost there, but that freedom to not be so constrained and kind of just allow the creativity to flow.
Yeah, and I think it becomes less boring.
Mm-hmm.
I think it becomes less real life and more animation.
Right.
That's kind of just how I see animation. It should be, there's a lot of things that happen at 24 frames per second with a character with a big head, or something that doesn't happen in real life. So you got to figure that out based on physics that and animation theories and all that. So I maybe it's just comfort of experience, but I feel more comfortable with my interpretive abilities these days than I have in the past. And I think that comes through in my workflow.
That's cool. I think the other thing I noticed here too, because for myself, when I shot reference and trying to extrapolate that, or at least having it in the background,
yeah, I
had a very tough time finding out where things began and ended, if that makes sense. It looked like it was just all one motion to me. So I would lose some of that here. With your approach here, it sounds like it's, like I said, it kind of takes some of that guesswork out of the way. These are just the things I'm trying to hit here, and then move it away. You aren't going back to your reference. You're just now looking at as animation now. How am I going to get from A to B now, and then B to C, and then C to D?
And there's still that people still ask, and it's still, it's a legitimate question. Like how do I find those moments in my reference? Mm-hmm. And I'll just play it at slow speed or scrub through it at slow speed. And you almost want to stop at that frame that you go, right there. All the ingredients have just hit. My facial expression, my body language, the force, the balance, all of it just so I'm gonna strip away everything else that's around it and magnify that moment in my animation. And this is caricaturing. That's where that's what you do when you do people's faces. You just go, well, I'm noticing that they have a curly little mouth and they have a big nose or whatever, and you just magnify those things and leave out everything else. So yeah, that's still, I think, a sensitivity you need to get used to, but that's your power of observation. If you can do that when you're just out in the real world watching people, you get better at that in the real world, then you get better at that when you watch yourself making a fool out of yourself.
That's great. Okay, now let's transition a little bit. You mentioned Crackerbox. Yeah. That's your studio?
Yeah, it's not a studio per se, but it's my project right now. Yeah. It's oh no, I was just gonna say it's really it's a group of people. It's not just me. But yeah, I can to give you the little story of it if you want.
No, absolutely. Because basically at one point you left DreamWorks to now be freelance.
Yeah, I was made that decision to not renew the contract, and I was gonna, because half of me was just a little fatigued, but the other half I was ready to kind of take even more ownership of some things I was doing. And before I came to feature, my plan was to do this, was to create animation for educational stuff. And like Schoolhouse Rock kind of stuff. So you can't. And one thing I learned that I didn't know before I was really in the thick of it was that you just can't do animation by yourself. And I'm still learning that. I'm still trying to figure that. But it takes a team of people doing a lot of stuff. And so I immediately called some friends and I was like, okay, I'm leaving DreamWorks. I want to do this thing. And all the people that I called were immediately interested, no questions asked. They were like, yep, I want to do it. And the people I called were, my friend Brian, who's a brilliant designer, and motion graphics designer and interface designer. My friend Bill, who's a brilliant coder. My friend Scott, who is like the most brilliant producer I know. I mean, and he's a friend, musician. I used to play with him a lot. So because we wanted it to be musical, and we had decided we wanted it to be technological, we wanted it to be a tablet-based kind of an interactive thing. So, but what happened is that then I ended up being the only animator again. So it took a really long time to produce this first thing, which was the GeoMe project, the app, because what it started off as just like a 3-minute song with some animation to it that then we could kind of make interactive. I was like, but it's global, so I can interview all my friends and I can make individual stories about them. And that became this multiverse song so now it's 12 minutes of animation that I'm doing in my free time and 2D, so it's a little more time intensive. And so I had to really simplify the process and simplify the style. But we brought it to a finish with the four of us. And we're really stoked because it's out there and people are playing it and writing us about it and having, and writing great reviews. So we're like stoked, but it didn't make a dime of money. So of course, after the glow kind of fades, I go to the guys, I go back up to Chicago and just gather everybody together. And I'm like, I'd understand if nobody wants to do this anymore because, it's not going to make us any money, and it's not going to, I said, I have ideas of how I want to streamline it going into the future. It's okay. And they each and every one of them unanimously turned and said, no, this is one of the coolest things I've ever done. Let's do it. Let's do more. So we're going to do more this year. So it's now at least an ongoing project.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I'm pretty stoked.
And right now it's just for the iPad?
Right now, that one's just for the iPad. What we've decided to do is that we're just going to do animated songs at first and not put all that effort into the app part of it until we can get kind of like a catalog of animated educational songs. And if there's ones that people respond to more than others, then we'll be like, oh, okay, cool. Let's make something out of that.
Right on.
So it's a little more streamlined, but it's still animated, musical, and a ton of fun. I mean, it's so free and silly and fun.
So if you got an iPad, go check out GeoMe. Can you spell it for us and how they can find it?
It's GEO-ME.
All right.
With an exclamation point.
Yeah, right. GeoMe. I got it on our iPad. The kids loved it. And so I think it's a really cool app to check out and support your fellow freelance animator.
Sure.
There.
They can hear me singing at the same time.
There you go. What are you enjoying about freelancing? I mean, you've obviously had a great career in the full feature, but one of the things I think people can kind of miss is it kind of seems like feature is the holy grail, but I think there's a lot of things that can kind of be missed. I don't know if we talked about it in one of the podcasts, but we also talked about even independent games and things of that nature where you need animation. There's so many areas that animation is needed. So what are one of the things that you're really enjoying about in your area right now?
Just having a larger role in the final product, which I think is kind of the obvious answer, but it's true because I mean, feature is the holy grail for a lot of reasons. I mean, not only are you contributing to something that millions and millions of people are going to see around the globe and remember and whatever, but you're also learning how the process works because this is the largest way it's done, and you get to see all the departments and really the huge responsibility creating even a short film is, and the power of collaboration. I learned this when I was in bands, that you could sit in your basement and you can write tunes all day, but until you bring it into rehearsal and everybody jams on it, it becomes way better. So that's the same thing in film. So I think I learned a ton of that kind of stuff being in feature. But there's also the side of it that you are just a tiny, tiny little piece, and you may come out of, 5 years worth of working and have 5 minutes worth of stuff, and that's kind of weird, but it's cool. I'm proud of it. But at a certain point, like I said, I think I got fatigued a little bit because it was so focused. That's what I wanted. Like I was like, I just want the opportunity to focus on one thing. And then when I'm focusing on one thing, I'm like, I just want the opportunity to not have to focus on one thing. and so getting back into working independently and being being a hired gun is cool because the people who are hiring you depend on you to make more decisions and express your opinion about the final outcome that much more. And then in the stuff I'm doing, like I'm the only animator on usually, so the entire thing is I can say I animated that whole thing, and that's rewarding. And so it's a grass is always greener scenario, but for now I'm finding this grass a little greener because I like being involved from the concept stage. So
very cool.
Yeah.
One of the other things I wanted to talk about was some of the training you've produced in the past, but you also mentioned you got something coming out here in the next couple of weeks, or maybe by the time this is out, probably by, it might be out by then.
Might be. Whoa.
Yeah, we're in the future. So what was it that kind of made you want to jump into a little bit of tutorial-based training?
Just Jason giving me the opportunity to teach, I think opened up. I mean, it was a really big light bulb moment because I had not tried to teach animation before. I've taught, I've like friends of mine when I was in graphic design, I'd give people classes in Photoshop and Illustrator. And so I knew how to communicate stuff, but I was like, oh, wow, how do you teach animation? So I had to figure it out as much as possible. But I figured it out, and I figured out that, wait a minute, I think I actually had figured out a pretty good way of explaining some things. Mm-hmm. Not everything, but some things. And so I thought, well, I want to, Jason's tutorials were such a huge hit. I mean, those are awesome. And he's amazing at explaining things. He's a born teacher. So I was inspired by that. I was like, and actually he was encouraging us a little bit. He's like, why don't you guys try these things too? I mean, that's Jason's nature. Like, hey, I'm doing this really cool thing. You guys should do it too. Let's get you started. I mean, he was really, stories about before the school started, and that he was great with that. So anyway, he, with his encouragement and with his inspiration on that side of it, I was like, I'm gonna give it a try. And it came together. The first one came together, albeit it was really, really long. I as you can see, I have a hard time coming up with concise ideas. But I feel like I got it. And once the first one was well received and people said, you really explain these things really well, I thought, well, okay, this must have hit on something. I want to do some more because this is really fun. And all the blogs that were out then of other animators, I'm like, this is how it works. Mm-hmm. Like, you just kind of take what you have and just and lay it back out there in the way that you've interpreted it, and then somebody else is going to pick that up and go, that's awesome, and then hopefully that'll continue on.
Yeah. What is the training about for this one coming up?
So cartoony stuff.
Ooh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, that was people have been requesting like what. And that was the biggest request of what probably people wanted to see next, is kind of more cartoony style stuff. And since I've been getting to really dive into that with the freelance jobs I've been working on, I just wanted to kind of share what my explorations have discovered. I think I've come up with a process that has been working for me. So this one's just about pushing it. It's about coming up with pushing movement and poses to kind of really, really exaggerate in a cartoony style while still adhering to something believable and that connects with your audience. But it's really mostly about the style. What are those it's a process I go through to get it to look like that.
That's great.
Yeah.
What are you enjoying teaching here at iAnimate?
All of it. I like Workshop 6 a lot, because it's so comprehensive, because I have no choice but to talk about everything from basic foundational mechanics all the way through nuanced acting and cinema studies, and those are all things that I've had, you know, I've taken classes in and had experience in and learned. It was another thing from feature film studios. You sit in dailies every day. The things you learn just about film is awesome. So it's nice to be able to kind of give that back in a way, like, and I'll bring up experiences of different shots and different movies too. But so I like 6 a lot. I think just being able to talk about stuff that people maybe haven't thought of before. That's the part, like at the end of a lecture when somebody's like, I totally never thought of that before. See it in the little text box or they'll say it. I'm like, excellent. That's exactly it. Hopefully I'm not just
Rambling.
regurgitating
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
You dig in the live interactive feedback with the students?
A lot. That changed everything. Because like I said, I've been through other programs and you have to ask questions. I love asking questions. And this is what I use it for the most, is because if you're watching an animator's scene and you're making a note on something based on your own interpretation of it, you could be totally off of what their intention is. So I make it a point in live interactions to stop and say, okay, wait a minute. Before I say this, what is it that you think the character's thinking at this moment, and what are they trying to display to who they're talking to? And that's like, I ask that question a lot, and I forgot about that. That was something I had to figure out. And having the live interaction actually taught me that, because the students would start being like, well, wait. I'd be giving a note. They'd be like, yeah, but, it's like, oh, right, of course. Yeah. What are you wanting to do so that I can help you do what you want to do? Because who cares what I think this move should look like if it's not really what you're intending?
Now, all your notes are based upon a foundation of what they're wanting to achieve.
Yeah. And that's the same way a supervisor would work at a studio. Mm-hmm. And so in a school situation, it should be as close to a supervisor animator relationship as it can be. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how we could do it without being live.
Yeah. All right. WAM, World Animation Master Classes, that should be going on. And when is the date for that?
It's May, I think the 23rd through the 25th.
Okay, and that's in
Birmingham.
All right. UK. All right, we've got you and Jason and a bunch of other animators.
And Krista Roche and Ed Hooks. And Eamon Butler. I mean, that's a serious roster he pulled together. I'm feel like I'm just hanging out with, somebody lit me up on the mountain. But I think what's cool about the pressure's not that great, because Jason and I are doing the class together.
Oh, okay. How's that working?
I know. I don't know how the idea came about, but it has ended up that way, and both of us kind of embraced it immediately. I think we both were like, actually, that's a pretty cool idea, because guess what? Here's what we could do. And we started talking about how we started talking about that Megamind experience when we shot the thing, and collaborating on your video reference. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take an acting problem and try to solve it in all of the steps that he and I use. Thumbnailing, and then how do we approach going in front of the camera and actually collaborate live.
That's awesome.
That's gonna be a blast. And how we have, we will probably, when it comes down to sitting down and animating it, we may go dueling pianos and animate the same shot at the same time and see how it goes, or we may take the helm and the other one's over the shoulder, or somebody's talking, getting questions from the audience. It's just going to be so dynamic, and we both think it's going to be a blast.
Yeah, that's great, because one of the things when I wanted to start doing these podcasts is I wanted to kind of keep it more like what we're doing now, where it's kind of more of one-on-one. I think you can get a little focused on these, and that's why I appreciate it. But there was something when I started adding every once in a while multiple guests, And there's a feedback that you get as well that you don't get on the other end, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And so I can see where having that variety of either a single guest where you can kind of get more focused, or having more that kind of gives you that ability to ping off one another that brings out something different that you might not have thought about.
It's synergistic.
Yes. So I can see where that's going to be a lot of fun, man.
It is. I think he and I are going to end up asking each other lots of questions that we didn't expect to ask, you know. So.
And that's one of the things I think we need to get across to some of our listeners who maybe are still kind of in the student stage. You know, who was I talking with Ted a couple podcasts back? You know, he's talking about how, you know, he still struggles through some of the process, you know, or something right here where you're saying, hey, I'm going to ask questions from Jason. I think there was a level, at least for myself, looking at you guys and thinking, man, they've got it. They've arrived, and, you know.
Not at all.
But I know there's an aspect where you guys are going, no, I love learning and I love growing, and that's why I ask, you know, this artist this question or whatever. And so I think there's just a misconception amongst students that you guys still are loving to learn and still growing and pulling it from other artists, you know?
The one irony of animation is that it's slow, so experience in animation doesn't really add up to tons. I mean, it does, you know, obviously, you know, somebody like Ted who's been working for 20 years, you know, whatever. I count that in, you know, relative to me, I look at that and I go, oh my God, he's got tons of experience. But even so, each challenge with each shot is still an individual challenge because it's probably something you've never animated before. Mm-hmm. I don't think any animator gets to the point where they say, I've animated everything and now I can do it all. Every shot is something that you go, oh, wow. Okay, that's kind of like something I've done, but this is different, you know, so let me think this through. And that's the cool part of it, that you have a job that lets you analyze things, you know, and come up with solutions for them. I mean, that still happens, and I think every animator would say that. The cliche of "I'm still learning" is a cliche because it's true.
True, right?
Yeah, you always are. And I can't speak for everybody, but I tell my students, there's always still that point in the middle of every shot when you're like cleaning up those splines and getting ready to kind of bring it home, and you're looking at it going, I suck. I can't animate. You know, it still happens. So. You know, I hope that makes people feel better.
You know, it's kind of funny because I thought about that afterwards. I thought, well, man, maybe that doesn't make people feel better. Like it's never gonna be easy. But you know what, though, it is.
It's gonna be hell.
There is something that's nice about that because you feel like you're going, okay, I'm not alone on this. It's not just me, you know.
And it does get incrementally better. I'm not saying
right. No,
you will continue to suck, but because every new shot is a new problem, you will always have that moment that you doubt your own abilities. Mm-hmm. You know? So
push past it and success, and then you go to the next shot and kind of do the same thing. Huh?
Put one more triumph under your belt, which is great.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right, Ken, man, I really do appreciate your time. This has been a great podcast.
It was awesome.
I did not have to prepare any notes for this one here. I kind of felt like you were going to do a great job and run with it, and I think that succeeded.
Awesome. Yeah, this was fun. Thanks for having me, man. And it was good to see you.
You too. Thank you very much for your time.
Very often anymore.
I know. I'll have to jump in with some of your lectures every once in a while.
Yeah. You can join in. You can add your 2 cents.
All right.
Cool, dude.
Thanks, Ken. Take care, bud.
All right, man.